There's an ancient principle that few understand. Every evening, you step onto an invisible scale. On one side sits everything you did today, the discipline, the growth, the small victories. On the other side sits everything you could have done but didn't. And here's the truth that changes everything. The scale doesn't reset at midnight. It carries forward. Every night you tip it toward ease, comfort, and distraction. You're not just losing one evening, you're compounding a deficit that your future self will have to pay back with interest. I learned this the hard way. And I'm here tonight to show you the math that nobody teaches. You've been sold a lie about success. You've been told it's about morning routines, about rising early, about what you do in the first hour of your day. And while those things matter, they're not where most people lose the game. Most people lose between dinner and bedtime in those quiet hours when discipline battles distraction, when growth competes with comfort, when your future whispers while your present shouts. This video exists because I've spent a lifetime studying why people fail to become what they're capable of becoming. And I've discovered something that changed everything for me. Success is not about spectacular moments. It's about what you do in the forgettable hours, the evenings, the twilight time, the period between I'm done with my obligations and I'm going to sleep. Here's the core misunderstanding that's costing you your dreams. You think your evenings are for recovery, for reward, for escape. And in that misunderstanding, you're trading your future for temporary comfort. The unique insight I'm offering you tonight is this. Your evening hours are not rest time, they're investment time. Not all of them, not even most of them, but some of them, and the difference between people who transform their lives and people who merely survive them comes down to what they do with those hours. Common advice tells you to work harder. I'm telling you something different. Watch yourself when nobody else is watching, because that's when you're most honest. That's when you reveal what you truly value. That's when your real philosophy shows up. This isn't about adding more hustle or grinding yourself into exhaustion. This is about consciousness, awareness, looking honestly at how you spend the hours that feel like yours and asking, am I building or am I borrowing from tomorrow? Let me tell you about two farmers I once knew, not literally but philosophically. Both had the same size land, both had the same seeds, both had the same daylight hours to work, but one farmer understood something the other didn't. The first farmer would work his field all day, and when the sun started setting, he'd head straight home. I've earned my rest, he'd say, and nobody could argue with that. He'd worked hard. He deserved to put his feet up. So every evening, he'd eat a big dinner, sit in his comfortable chair, and let the day dissolve into entertainment and ease. He'd fall asleep content, wake up, and repeat the cycle. A good, honest, hard-working man. Nobody could say otherwise. He fulfilled his obligations. He did what was expected. He earned his living. The second farmer also worked his field all day. He also came home tired. His back ached just as much. His hands were just as calloused. His body was just as weary. But here's what he did differently. Before he sat down to rest, he'd spend just 30 minutes in his garden, a small plot behind his house, where he was experimenting with new techniques, studying his soil, planning next season's crop rotation. He didn't do this because he had to. Nobody was making him. His wife wasn't demanding it. His neighbors weren't watching. He did this because he understood something about time that most people never learn. He understood that evening hours don't count the same as morning hours. In the morning, you're doing what's required. You're meeting obligations. You're earning your living. You're responding to demands. You're maintaining the life you already have. But in the evening, when you're tired and no one's demanding anything from you, those hours are pure. They're voluntary. They're the difference between a life that works and a life that transforms. Now, let me paint you the picture of what happened over time, because this is where the story gets interesting. 5 years passed. The first farmer had the same size harvest he'd always had. Good enough to survive, good enough to maintain, good enough to keep doing what he'd always done. His life was stable, predictable, safe, and there's nothing wrong with that except that he'd had dreams once, he'd had ideas once, he'd imagined what his farm could become, but those dreams stayed dreams because his evenings stayed the same. The second farmer, his small evening experiments had taught him things the first farmer would never learn. Those 30-minute investments had compounded into knowledge, skill, and wisdom that transformed his entire operation. He discovered which seeds produced better yields in his specific soil. He learned which planting patterns maximized his harvest. He understood the subtle signs that told him when to water, when to wait, when to act. His harvest doubled, then tripled. Not because he worked longer days, he worked the same hours as the first farmer, but because he worked different evenings. The first farmer would shake his head and say, "He's just lucky. He must have better land. He probably got some inheritance I don't know about." But it wasn't luck. It wasn't better circumstances. It wasn't a secret advantage. It was the invisible work done in the invisible hours. It was the disciplines practiced when no one was watching. It was the choice made evening after evening after evening to invest 30 minutes in becoming someone different. Here's what this parable teaches, and I want you to really hear this. Most people are willing to do what's required during the day. That's not what separates success from mediocrity. Everyone shows up when they have to. Everyone meets their obligations when there's external pressure. Everyone performs when someone's watching. But what separates the farmer with the transformed life from the farmer with the maintained life is what you do with yourself when nobody requires anything, when you could quit, when you could coast, when comfort is calling and discipline is whispering. The invisible scale I mentioned at the beginning, that's what these two farmers were stepping on every evening. One farmer came home and immediately tipped the scale toward comfort, rest, entertainment, escape from the day. The other farmer came home and spent just 30 minutes tipping the scale toward growth, investment, building something beyond today. And over 5 years, those tiny evening tips created two completely different lives. Now, I want to tell you about a night that changed my life. I was in my mid-20s, working a job I didn't particularly love, living a life I didn't particularly hate. I wasn't failing, but I wasn't growing either. I was stuck in that dangerous middle ground where everything is fine enough that you don't change anything. You know that place? Where you're not miserable enough to make a drastic move, but you're not satisfied enough to feel fulfilled. That's where I was living. In the land of fine, in the territory of okay. And let me tell you something about that territory. It's more dangerous than rock bottom. Because when you're at rock bottom, you know you need to change. But when you're in the land of fine, you can stay there forever, slowly dying of unfulfilled potential. One evening, I came home from work exhausted. I'd put in my hours, done my job, met my responsibilities, punched the clock, earned my paycheck, and I did what I always did. I collapsed on the couch, turned on the television, and let the evening disappear into mindless consumption. Nothing wrong with that occasionally, right? Everyone needs to unwind. Everyone deserves to relax after a hard day's work. But this was my pattern. This was my normal. This was how I spent nearly every evening of my life. Day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, the same routine. Work, collapse, consume, sleep, repeat. But that particular night, something happened. Right in the middle of some show I can't even remember, and that's telling, isn't it? I can't remember the show, but I remember the moment I had this thought that hit me like ice water. If I keep doing this, where will I be in 5 years? And I knew the answer immediately. I didn't have to think about it. I didn't have to calculate it. I didn't have to project it. I knew I'd be in the same place, same job, same struggles, same frustrations, same dreams deferred, same life. Maybe a little older, maybe a little more tired, maybe a little more resigned, but essentially unchanged. And that thought terrified me more than failure ever could, because I realized something that night that I'd never understood before. I wasn't failing, I was just not growing. I was maintaining, treading water, surviving. And here's what nobody tells you about treading water. It feels like you're doing something. It feels like effort, but you're not going anywhere. You're just staying afloat in the same spot, getting more tired, until eventually you can't tread anymore. So I did something I'd never done before. I turned off the television right in the middle of the program. Just reached over, clicked the remote, and sat in silence. And that silence was deafening. Because when you remove the noise, when you stop the distraction, when you sit with yourself in the quiet, that's when you hear the truth. That's when you face what you've been avoiding. That's when you realize how much of your life you've been letting slip away, one comfortable evening at a time. I sat there in that silence, and I asked myself a hard question. What could I do right now, tonight, that my future self would thank me for? I didn't have a grand answer. I didn't suddenly develop a master plan. I didn't figure out my entire life in that moment. But I did something small. I picked up a book I'd been meaning to read for months. It had been sitting on my shelf, collecting dust, serving as decoration rather than education. I read for 30 minutes. That's all. 30 minutes. Then I went to bed. Nothing spectacular. Nothing heroic. Nothing that would make a good movie scene. Just 30 minutes of reading instead of 30 minutes of television. But here's what I didn't know then. I just made the most important decision of my life. Not because reading for 30 minutes changed me, but because I decided to treat my evening differently than I'd been treating it. The next night, I did it again. Not because I was motivated. I wasn't. I was tired. I wanted to collapse on the couch. I wanted to escape into entertainment. But I'd made a decision, and I decided to honor that decision. So I read for another 30 minutes, then another night, then another. Some nights I didn't want to. Some nights I thought, what's the point? 30 minutes isn't going to change anything. But I kept going anyway. Here's what I didn't know then, but understand completely now. Small disciplines practiced consistently in quiet hours become the substance of transformed lives. Within 6 months, those 30-minute evening reading sessions had changed my entire philosophy. The ideas I absorbed led to new thoughts. The new thoughts led to new perspectives. The new perspectives led to new actions. The new actions led to new results. The new results led to new opportunities. Within 2 years, I was living a completely different life, not because of one big breakthrough, but because I'd changed what I did when nobody was watching. Let me be specific about what changed, because this is important. I didn't suddenly get rich. I didn't win the lottery. I didn't stumble into some incredible opportunity that fell from the sky. What changed was my mind, my philosophy, my understanding of how life works. And once your understanding changes, everything else follows. I learned that success isn't an event, it's a process. I learned that you don't need to know the entire path. You just need to take the next step. I learned that small disciplines, practiced daily, create compound interest in your life. I learned that you can't change your life until you change your philosophy. And you can't change your philosophy until you change what you feed your mind. And I learned that the time to feed your mind is not when you're fresh and motivated, it's when you're tired and tempted to quit. Because that's when you build real character. The lesson from my personal story is this: your future doesn't care about your intentions. It doesn't care about your potential. It doesn't care about what you could do or what you might do or what you plan to do someday. It only cares about your patterns. And your evening patterns are writing your future story more powerfully than your daytime efforts ever could. Because your daytime efforts are influenced by external pressure. Your boss is watching. Your colleagues are there. Society is holding you accountable. But your evening hours, those are all you. Those reveal who you really are when no one's making you be anyone. Now let me take you forward. Imagine you could meet yourself 10 years from now. You walk into a room, and there you are, older, weathered, carrying the weight of a decade's worth of decisions. Maybe there are some gray hairs you don't have yet. Maybe there are lines on your face that haven't formed. Maybe there's a weariness in the eyes or a lightness in the step that you can't predict. And this future version of you looks at the current you and says, I need to tell you something. You're about to waste the next 10 years waiting for permission, waiting for the right time, waiting for circumstances to improve. You're going to tell yourself that you'll start investing in yourself when things calm down at work. You're going to tell yourself you'll start growing when you have more energy. You're going to tell yourself you'll start building your future when the timing is better. But here's what I know now that you don't know yet. The right time is always tonight, not tomorrow morning when you're fresh, not next week when things calm down, not next month when the project is finished, not next year when circumstances improve. Tonight, right now, in those hours between obligation and sleep, that's where the real game is won or lost. You think you're resting in those evening hours, you think you're recovering, you think you deserve to unwind after working hard all day, and you do deserve rest, some rest. But what you're actually doing night after night is practicing. You're practicing either discipline or distraction. You're practicing either growth or decay. You're practicing either building or borrowing. And whatever you practice becomes permanent. Whatever you repeat becomes who you are. Whatever you do consistently becomes your destiny. I've lived the next 10 years already. I know where your evening habits lead. I've walked the path that starts with what you're doing tonight. And I'm here to tell you, change them now. Not dramatically, not through force, not through some intense transformation that burns you out in a week, but through awareness. Through small conscious choices that compound into completely different destinations. Because here's what nobody told us. Success isn't built during work hours. It's built during the hours that feel like they're yours. And right now you're giving those hours away to comfort and distraction. You're trading your future for your present. And 10 years from now, I'm the one who has to live with that trade. I'm the one who has to wake up and realize that we could have been somewhere completely different. If only we'd understood that our evenings mattered. The truth in this story is simple. You already know what your future self wishes you would do tonight. You already know which habits are building your dreams and which habits are stealing them. You know. In that quiet place inside where you're completely honest with yourself, you know. The question isn't whether you know. The question is, will you listen? Will you act? Will you make the choice that your future self is begging you to make? Now let me teach you something about time that most people never understand, because this is foundational to everything else I'm going to share with you. Time is not equal. An hour at 9 in the morning and an hour at 9 in the evening are not worth the same. They don't count the same. They don't compound the same. They don't build the same. This is critical to understand, because once you understand this, your entire approach to your day changes. Morning hours are required hours. You have to get up. You have to go to work. You have to meet obligations. You have to show up. There's external pressure, external accountability, external structure. Your alarm goes off. Traffic is waiting. Your boss is expecting you. Your responsibilities are stacked up. Society helps you with morning discipline. Morning discipline is important, but it's also forced discipline. It's mandatory discipline. It's discipline you practice because you have to, not because you choose to. But evening hours are voluntary hours. Nobody makes you grow in the evening. Nobody checks on you. Nobody holds you accountable. Nobody calls to ask if you invested in yourself tonight. Nobody grades your evening choices. The world gives you permission to coast, to relax, to escape, to check out. Society tells you you've earned it. You've worked hard. You deserve to unwind. And that's precisely why evening discipline is worth more than morning discipline. When you choose to grow when you could choose to coast. That's when you're making deposits into your future that compound at extraordinary rates, because you're building something rare, voluntary excellence. You're developing the kind of discipline that doesn't need external pressure. You're becoming someone who does what's right not because they have to, but because they've decided to. You're building internal structure instead of relying on external structure. And internal structure is what creates lasting transformation. Here's the economic principle that changes everything. Scarcity creates value. Morning discipline is common. Millions of people show up when they have to. Millions of people perform when there's pressure. Millions of people work when someone's watching. But evening discipline, evening growth, evening investment in yourself when you're tired and nobody's watching, that's rare. And rare compounds into extraordinary. Think about it this way. If everyone did it, it wouldn't create an advantage. But most people don't do it. Most people give away their evening hours. Most people trade their voluntary time for temporary comfort. So when you invest those hours, when you use them to build something, when you practice disciplines that nobody requires, you're doing something that the majority will never do. And that's why it creates such disproportionate results. Every evening you stand at a fork in the road. Most people don't realize they're standing there. They think they're just living their life making casual choices about how to spend a few hours before bed. They think these choices don't matter much. They think it's just TV or reading, just scrolling or sleeping early, just entertainment or effort. But they're wrong. These aren't casual choices. These are life-determining choices. One path leads to entertainment, distraction, and comfort. There's nothing evil about this path. I want to be clear about that. There's nothing wrong with rest. There's nothing wrong with entertainment. There's nothing wrong with unwinding after a hard day's work. This path feels good. It feels earned. After a hard day's work, you deserve to relax, to unwind, to let your mind drift into something that doesn't require effort. And some evenings, this is exactly what you should do. Some evenings, the best investment you can make is rest, real rest, restorative rest, the kind of rest that allows you to show up strong tomorrow. But the other path leads to investment, growth, and building. This path doesn't feel as good in the moment. It requires you to delay gratification. It asks you to do something difficult when you're already tired. It demands discipline when you've already given so much discipline during the day. It challenges you to choose long-term value over short-term pleasure. It requires you to be uncomfortable when comfort is available. It asks you to think about tomorrow when today is hard enough. Here's the truth that changes everything. Both paths seem equal in the moment. Both seem like reasonable choices. Both seem justifiable. But over time, they lead to completely different lives. The comfort path maintains. The growth path transforms. The comfort path keeps you where you are. The growth path moves you toward where you want to be. The comfort path feels right tonight. The growth path makes you right for tomorrow. The comfort path is easy now and hard later. The growth path is hard now and easy later. Most people spend most of their evenings on the comfort path. And there's nothing wrong with that until you wake up 5 years from now and realize you're in the exact same place, wondering why your life hasn't changed, wondering why your dreams are still dreams, wondering why you're still struggling with the same problems, wondering why you haven't become who you thought you'd become. And then you look back and you realize I had 5 years worth of evenings. I had over 1,800 individual chances to choose differently. And I chose comfort over growth almost every single time. Here's the paradox that most people never resolve. You can't walk both paths. You have to choose. And here's the harder truth. You don't just choose once. You choose every single evening. There's no permanent decision. There's no one-time commitment that carries you forward forever. Every evening when you're tired and comfortable and nobody's watching you, stand at that fork again and you choose again. And that choice compounds. That choice accumulates. That choice becomes your life. Now let me tell you about the most powerful kind of discipline, the kind nobody sees, nobody applauds, nobody even knows about. I call it invisible discipline. And it's the most important kind of discipline you'll ever practice. When you work hard at your job, people see it. Your boss notices. Your colleagues observe. You get feedback. When you achieve something public, people celebrate it. They congratulate you. They recognize your effort. When you make a visible effort, you get visible feedback, and that feedback is fuel. It helps you keep going. It validates your effort. It makes discipline easier because there's external reward. But what about the discipline nobody sees? What about the book you read when you could watch television? What about the 30 minutes you spend planning tomorrow when you could scroll mindlessly through your phone? What about the early bedtime you choose when you could stay up late doing nothing productive? What about the healthy meal you prepare when you could order something easy? What about the journal entry you write when you could skip it? What about the skill you practice when no one will ever know you practiced it? Nobody sees these choices. Nobody congratulates you. Nobody knows you made them. Nobody pats you on the back. Nobody gives you a gold star. Nobody posts about it on social media. And that's precisely why they're the most important choices you make. Because invisible discipline builds something that visible discipline can't. Character. Not reputation, character. Not image, substance. Not what people think you are, what you actually are when nobody's looking. Not the person you perform as the person you've become. I learned this principle from watching successful people over decades. Not just successful for a moment, successful for a lifetime. Not just successful in one area, successful across the board. Not just successful in public, successful in private. And the ones who last, the ones who build something real, the ones who transform their lives and keep them transformed, they all have one thing in common. They practice disciplines in private that produce results in public. Your evening hours are your private laboratory. They're where you experiment with who you're becoming. They're where you practice the disciplines that nobody requires, but everybody who succeeds practices anyway. They're where you build the foundation that nobody sees, but everything rests on. Think about a building. The most important part of a building isn't the beautiful exterior or the impressive lobby or the stunning views from the top floor. The most important part is the foundation, and nobody sees the foundation. It's underground. It's invisible, but everything depends on it. Your evening disciplines are the foundation of your life. Nobody sees them, but everything you build depends on them. Here's a mathematical truth that'll change how you see your evenings. Small actions practiced consistently don't add up. They multiply. This is not metaphor. This is not inspiration. This is mathematics. This is compound interest applied to personal development. Let me show you what I mean. If you invest 30 minutes every evening in reading, you're not just gaining 30 minutes of knowledge. That would be addition. That would be simple accumulation. But that's not what happens. You're building a habit of growth. You're training your mind to value learning. You're creating neural pathways that make discipline easier next time. You're becoming someone who grows instead of someone who coasts. You're shifting your identity. You're changing your philosophy. You're transforming how you see yourself and how you interact with the world. After a week, you've read for 3.5 hours. That's good, but not life-changing. You've made progress, but you're not transformed yet. After a month, you've read for 15 hours. You've probably finished a substantial book. You're starting to see ideas connect. You're beginning to notice patterns. You're developing new perspectives. That's better. That's meaningful. That's starting to compound. After a year, you've read for 182 hours. You've consumed multiple books. You've absorbed philosophies. You've encountered ideas that challenged you, stretched you, changed you. You've changed how you think. Now we're talking about real transformation. You are literally a different person than you would have been. Your mind works differently. Your philosophy has deepened. Your capabilities have expanded. Your understanding of life has evolved. After 5 years, you've invested over 900 hours in your own development. 900 hours, that's almost 40 full days of reading. That's equivalent to a full-time job for 6 months. That's a complete education in whatever subject you chose to study. You are literally a different person than you would have been. You've compounded those 30-minute investments into a completely transformed life. But here's the flip side, and this is where it gets sobering. If you spend those same 30 minutes every evening in mindless distraction, you're not just losing 30 minutes. You're practicing the habit of escape. You're training your mind to avoid difficulty. You're reinforcing patterns of procrastination. You're building an identity around entertainment and distraction. You're strengthening the neural pathways that make discipline harder. You're compounding in the wrong direction. The law of compounding works both ways. It's neutral. It doesn't care which direction you're going. It just multiplies whatever you're doing. You're either compounding towards your dreams or compounding towards your regrets. And the choice is made every evening in those quiet hours when nobody's watching, when no one's forcing you, when you're tired and comfortable and could go either way. Let me share something that took me years to understand. Your days maintain your present. Your nights build your future. This distinction is crucial. During the day, you're managing. You're handling obligations. You're responding to demands. You're putting out fires. You're maintaining the life you already have. You're dealing with what's in front of you. This is necessary. This is important. But this is not where transformation happens. Transformation happens in the margins, in the extra hours, in the voluntary efforts, in the disciplines nobody requires, in the time that's truly yours, in the space where you get to choose without external pressure. Your evening hours are margin hours. They're the space between obligation and sleep. And what you do in that space determines whether your life expands or contracts, whether you grow or merely age, whether you build something meaningful or just survive another day, whether you become someone different or remain who you've always been. I've watched people waste their margin hours for decades and then wonder why their lives never change. I've watched others invest just a small portion of their margin hours and transform everything. The difference isn't talent. I've seen talented people waste their margins and go nowhere. The difference isn't opportunity. I've seen people with incredible opportunities squander them because they didn't prepare in their margin hours. The difference isn't luck. I've seen unlucky people overcome circumstances through what they did in their margins. The difference is consciousness. Are you aware that your evening hours are future-building hours? Or do you treat them like they're neutral, like they don't count, like they're just empty time between work and sleep? Here's a truth that'll make you uncomfortable. Every evening you're taking a test, and nobody told you you're being tested. There's no announcement, there's no proctor, there's no formal examination. But the test is happening whether you know it or not. The test is simple. Will you do what's easy, or will you do what's valuable? Will you choose comfort, or will you choose growth? Will you invest in your future, or will you borrow from it? Will you be the person you are, or will you become the person you could be? Nobody announces this test. There's no one standing there saying, this is important, this matters, this is being recorded. There's no grade at the end. There's no immediate consequence for failing. You can fail this test tonight and wake up tomorrow and everything will seem fine. And that's exactly why most people fail it every single night. Because there's no immediate feedback. Because comfort feels good and discipline feels hard. Because the consequences are delayed. Because you can get away with it tonight and tomorrow and next week and next month. But here's what I've learned over decades of studying success and failure. Life is grading you anyway. Not with letters or numbers, but with results, with outcomes, with the life you wake up to 5 years from now, with the person you become, with the opportunities that appear or don't appear, with the capabilities you develop or don't develop, with the relationships you build or don't build, with the character you forge or don't forge. Life is always grading you. It's just not giving you the grade until it's too late to change it. The people who understand this truth treat their evening hours differently. They don't see them as free time. They don't see them as reward time. They don't see them as escape time. They see them as test time. They know they're being evaluated not by others, but by their own future self. Not by external standards, but by their own potential. Not by what's required, but by what's possible. And they ask themselves every evening a simple but powerful question. If my future self could grade my choices tonight, what grade would I earn? That question changes everything. Because suddenly, your evening choices aren't casual anymore. They're not neutral anymore. They're not just about tonight. They're either building your future or mortgaging it. They're either creating the person you want to become or reinforcing the person you've always been. Now, here's the paradox that surprises people. Evening discipline doesn't imprison you. It liberates you. This goes against everything most people believe. Most people think discipline is restrictive. They think it limits freedom. They think it takes away pleasure. They think it makes life harder. They think it's about denying yourself things you enjoy. So they choose comfort and call it freedom. They choose entertainment and call it living. They choose ease and call it self-care. But watch what happens over time. The person who chooses comfort every evening becomes enslaved to comfort. They can't go without it. They need the distraction. They depend on the escape. They require the entertainment to feel okay. They've trained themselves to be weak when they're tired. They've conditioned themselves to need external stimulation. They've lost the ability to be alone with their own thoughts. They've become dependent on comfort, and dependency is the opposite of freedom. Meanwhile, the person who practices evening discipline develops something powerful, the ability to act independently of how they feel. They can grow even when they're tired. They can build even when they're comfortable. They can choose long-term value over short-term pleasure. They can delay gratification. They can endure discomfort. They can function without external entertainment. They're free from the need for constant stimulation. They're liberated from the tyranny of their feelings. Who's actually free? The person who needs comfort to get through the evening? The person who can't sit in silence? The person who requires constant entertainment? The person who's enslaved to their devices and distractions? Or the person who can choose growth regardless of how they feel? The person who has options? The person who's built internal strength? The person who's developed voluntary discipline? True freedom isn't doing whatever you want in the moment. That's not freedom, that's slavery to impulse. True freedom is becoming someone who wants what's valuable. True freedom is developing the character that makes good choices natural. True freedom is building the discipline that makes growth automatic. And that transformation happens in the evening hours. When you practice choosing your future over your feelings. When you practice choosing value over comfort. When you practice being who you want to become instead of who you've always been. Let me teach you something about philosophy. Most people think philosophy is abstract, theoretical, disconnected from real life. They think it's something professors discuss in universities. They think it's something ancient Greeks worried about. They think it's impractical, irrelevant, not useful for everyday life. But I learned from my mentor something that changed my life. Your philosophy is nothing more than the principles you actually live by. Not the principles you agree with, not the principles you like, not the principles you say you believe, the principles you actually practice when nobody's watching. And here's how you discover your real philosophy. Watch what you do in the evening. Your evening habits reveal your actual philosophy more honestly than your words ever could. Because in the evening, you're not performing for anyone. You're not trying to impress anyone. You're not meeting anyone's expectations. You're just being who you actually are. You're revealing what you actually value. You're showing what you actually believe about life, about growth, about yourself, about your future. Do you practice the philosophy of comfort, of escape, of distraction, of immediate gratification, of doing only what's required? Or do you practice the philosophy of growth, of building, of investing in yourself, of delayed gratification, of voluntary excellence? Your evenings tell the truth. Your evenings reveal your real philosophy. And your real philosophy determines your real results. If you don't like what your evening habits reveal about your philosophy, here's the good news. You can change your philosophy by changing your evening practices. You don't have to have some massive internal revelation. You don't have to go on some spiritual journey. You don't have to attend seminars or read 1,000 books or have some profound awakening. You just have to change what you do. Start small. Don't try to revolutionize your entire evening routine tonight. Don't try to become someone completely different by tomorrow. Just introduce one small discipline, one small investment in yourself. Practice it consistently. Let it become part of who you are. Over time, that small practice will shift your entire philosophy because you become what you practice in the dark hours. Your philosophy is not what you think, it's what you do repeatedly when no one's making you do it. Change your practices and you'll change your philosophy. Change your philosophy and you'll change your life. Here's the first practical step I want you to take, and it's simpler than you think. Tonight before you go to bed, I want you to conduct what I call an evening audit. Take out a piece of paper, not your phone, not your tablet, not your computer, actual paper, and answer these 3 questions honestly. What did I do tonight that my future self will thank me for? Be specific, not what you intended to do, not what you planned to do. What did you actually do? Did you read? Did you plan? Did you learn something new? Did you practice a skill? Did you invest in a relationship? Did you take care of your health? Did you do anything that builds your future? What did I do tonight that my future self will wish I hadn't done? Again, be honest. Did you waste time? Did you indulge in distractions you don't even enjoy? Did you stay up too late doing nothing productive? Did you eat things that made you feel worse? Did you avoid things you know you should have done? Did you choose comfort when you should have chosen growth? If I could repeat tonight with what I know now, what would I change? This is the most important question because it reveals what you already know needs to change. You don't need someone to tell you. You already know. In that honest place inside yourself, you know what you should be doing differently. That's it. 3 questions, 5 minutes. But here's what this simple practice does. It creates consciousness. It makes your evening hours visible to you. Most people sleepwalk through their evenings. They don't realize what they're doing or not doing. They're unconscious. They're on autopilot. They're just reacting to impulses and habits they never chose. This audit creates awareness. And awareness is the first step toward change. You can't change what you're not aware of. You can't improve what you don't examine. Do this for 7 days. Just 7 days. Don't try to change anything yet. Don't judge yourself. Don't beat yourself up. Just observe. Just notice. Just become aware of how you're actually spending your evening hours. Write it down. Be honest. Look at the patterns. After 7 days, patterns will emerge. You'll see clearly what's building your future and what's stealing it. You'll see the habits you didn't realize you had. You'll see the time you're wasting that you thought you were using well. You'll see the gaps between who you think you are and who you actually are. And once you see clearly, you can choose clearly. Here's the second practice, and this one requires commitment. I want you to identify one 30-minute block in your evening that becomes non-negotiable time for your future. Not the whole evening. I'm not asking you to transform every hour, just 30 minutes. But these 30 minutes are sacred. They're protected. They're dedicated to growth, to building, to investing in yourself. These 30 minutes are not available for entertainment, not available for distraction, not available for escape. These 30 minutes belong to your future. What should you do in these 30 minutes? That depends on what your future needs most. Let me give you some options. And you choose what resonates with where you are and where you want to go. Read something that expands your mind. Not entertainment reading. Not escape reading. Not gossip or news or social media. Developmental reading. Books that challenge you, that teach you, that make you think differently. Books about philosophy, about success, about skills you want to develop, about lives you want to learn from. Books that stretch your understanding and expand your possibilities. Plan tomorrow. Most people start their day reactive. They wake up and respond to whatever comes at them. They check their phone and let other people's priorities become their priorities. They start the day defensive instead of offensive. But what if you spent 30 evening minutes designing tomorrow, identifying your priorities, planning your attacks, deciding in advance what matters most? You'd start the day proactive instead of reactive. You'd be in control instead of being controlled. Develop a skill. Is there something you've always wanted to learn? Something that would enhance your value, your capabilities, your future? Something that would make you more valuable in the marketplace? Something that would open new opportunities? 30 minutes a day compounds into expertise faster than you'd believe. In 1 year, you'll have over 180 hours of practice. That's enough to become competent at almost any skill. In 5 years, you'll be an expert. Journal your growth. Write about what you're learning, what you're becoming, what you're discovering about yourself and about life. This isn't diary keeping. This is philosophy development. This is capturing insights before they disappear. This is making sense of your experiences. This is turning life into lessons. This is becoming conscious of your growth instead of just growing accidentally. The specific activity matters less than the principle. You're claiming 30 minutes of your evening for your future instead of surrendering your entire evening to your present. You're drawing a line and saying, this time is protected. This time is invested. This time belongs to who I'm becoming, not who I've been. Here's something most people don't understand. The transition from day to evening is critical, and most people handle it unconsciously, which is why their evenings drift into waste. They come home tired, they collapse, they turn on distractions, and the evening disappears without them ever making a conscious choice. So I want you to create what I call a transition ritual, a specific sequence of actions that marks the shift from daytime obligations to evening opportunities. Here's mine as an example. When I come home from work, I don't immediately collapse. I don't immediately turn on distractions. I don't immediately surrender to tiredness. Instead, I have a ritual. First, I change my clothes, not into pajamas, into intentional evening clothes. This signals to my mind, the workday is over, but the growing day is beginning. It's a physical marker of transition. Second, I take a 10-minute walk, just around the block. Nothing intense, nothing difficult, just movement. This clears my head, transitions my energy, and gives me space to shift from reactive to proactive. It separates work mode from evening mode. It gives me a chance to process the day and prepare for the evening. Third, I review my evening intentions. I ask myself, what's one thing I can do tonight that'll matter tomorrow? Then I commit to that one thing before I allow myself any comfort activities. I don't commit to 10 things, not 5 things, just one thing. One small investment in my future. And I do that thing first before I do anything else. Then, after I've done that one thing, I'm free to relax, to unwind, to enjoy the evening however I want. This ritual takes maybe 20 minutes total. But it transforms my entire evening because it creates intentionality instead of passivity. Your ritual doesn't have to be the same as mine. Create your own. But make it deliberate. Make it consistent. Make it the bridge between the day you survived and the evening you'll invest. Here's a powerful principle. It's easier to maintain discipline when you stack small disciplines together. So here's the practice. Identify 3 small evening disciplines you want to build. Not huge commitments. Not life-changing marathons. Small, achievable practices. Then stack them together so they become a sequence. So they flow naturally from one to the next. For example, from 8 to 8:30, read. From 8:30 to 9, plan tomorrow. From 9 to 9:15, journal. When you stack disciplines, each one creates momentum for the next. The reading warms up your mind, gets you thinking, activates your mental energy. The planning channels your insights, takes the ideas from reading and applies them to your actual life. The journaling captures your growth, documents what you're learning, makes you conscious of your development. Start with a 45-minute discipline stack. Not every night, maybe 3 nights a week. But make those 3 nights non-negotiable. Let the other nights be pure rest. Let yourself relax completely. Let yourself enjoy comfort without guilt. But on those 3 nights, you're someone who invests. You're someone who builds. You're someone who grows. Over time, these discipline stacks become automatic. They stop being hard. They stop requiring willpower. They become part of who you are. They become your evening identity. I'm someone who invests in myself when others are coasting. I'm someone who builds my future when others are borrowing from theirs. I'm someone who practices invisible disciplines that produce visible results. Now, here's a practice that's just as important as what you add. What will you eliminate? Most people's evenings are cluttered with time-wasting habits they've never consciously chosen. They just accumulated over time, scrolling through social media, watching shows you don't even enjoy, checking news you don't need to know, eating out of boredom rather than hunger, staying up late doing nothing just because you don't want the day to end. I'm not saying eliminate all comfort. I'm not saying become a grinding machine. I'm not saying never relax, but I am saying identify one evening habit that serves your present but steals from your future and eliminate it. Just one, not 5, not everything. Just one clear waste of your evening hours. Maybe it's the hour you spend scrolling through social media before bed. Ask yourself, does this make me better? Does this teach me anything? Does this improve my life? Or does it just fill time, create comparison, and make me feel worse? Maybe it's the 2nd or 3rd hour of television after you've already relaxed. The 1st hour might be genuine rest. But the 2nd and 3rd, that's just avoiding going to bed. That's just killing time. That's just comfort addiction. Maybe it's staying up too late doing nothing, which makes you exhausted for tomorrow. You're not doing anything valuable with those late hours. You're just awake, just scrolling, just existing. And it's stealing your morning energy, your daytime. Focus. Your ability to show up strong tomorrow. Eliminate one. Replace it with nothing, or replace it with one of the practices above, but stop letting it steal from your future. You'll be amazed at how much time you reclaim. You'll be shocked at how much energy you have. You'll be surprised at how much you can build when you stop wasting what you already have. Finally, I want you to establish a weekly evening review. Every Sunday evening, look back at the week that just passed. Don't look forward yet. Look backward first. Ask yourself, how did I spend my evening hours this week? Which nights did I invest in my future, and which nights did I waste? What patterns am I noticing? What habits showed up? What choices did I make repeatedly? What one change would make next week's evenings more valuable? This isn't about guilt. This isn't about beating yourself up. This isn't about shame or regret or dwelling on mistakes. This is about conscious course correction. You can't change what you don't measure. You can't improve what you don't examine. This weekly review makes your evening patterns visible so you can shape them intentionally instead of letting them shape you accidentally. The truth is this, these practices aren't complicated. They're not demanding huge sacrifices. They're not asking you to become someone you're not. They're simply asking you to become conscious of the hours that are currently unconscious and to make small, deliberate investments in the life you say you want. So let me bring this all together. We've talked about something simple tonight, something so simple that most people dismiss it. We've talked about what you do in the evening, in those quiet hours between obligation and sleep, when nobody's watching and nobody's demanding anything from you. And I've told you that these hours matter more than you think, that they're not neutral, that they're not rest time or recovery time or meaningless time. They're future building time if you choose to. Use them that way. They're the invisible scale that's weighing every choice, every habit, every discipline, every distraction, and that scale doesn't reset. It carries forward. It compounds. It builds into the life you'll wake up to 5 years from now. Here's the transformation I want you to understand. You don't need to revolutionize your entire life. You don't need to work more hours. You don't need to sacrifice your rest or your relationships or your well-being. You don't need to become a grinding machine or a productivity robot or someone who never enjoys life. You just need to become conscious of your evening hours and invest a small portion of them in becoming someone different. 30 minutes. That's all I'm asking. 30 conscious minutes where you choose growth over drift, where you invest in your future instead of borrowing from it, where you practice disciplines that nobody sees but that compound into everything. The farmer who spent 30 evening minutes in his experimental garden didn't sacrifice his rest, he didn't burn out, he didn't lose his joy. He just added one small discipline to his evening routine, and it transformed his entire life. I spent 30 evening minutes reading when I could have been watching television, and it changed my philosophy, which changed my actions, which changed my results, which changed my life. I became someone different, not because of one dramatic moment, but because of thousands of small evening choices that nobody saw, nobody applauded, nobody even knew about. You can do the same. Starting tonight, here's your mantra in my voice, and I want you to repeat this to yourself. My evenings don't belong to comfort alone, they belong to the person I'm becoming. And tonight, I choose to invest in that person, not with everything I have, not with every minute, but with enough consciousness, enough discipline, and enough care to make tomorrow different from today. You're not lost, you're not behind, you're not broken, you haven't missed your chance, you haven't wasted too much time, it's not too late, you've just been unconscious about the hours that matter most, but now you know, now you see, now you understand that your future is watching what you do tonight, and now you can choose. Your future is being written tonight, in the quiet hours, in the invisible choices, in the disciplines nobody sees, in the margins between obligation and sleep, in the voluntary hours when you could coast but choose to grow, in the tired moments when you could escape but choose to build, in the private laboratory of your evening where nobody's watching but everything's being determined. Make them count. And listen, if this resonated with you, if something I said tonight shifted how you see your evenings, if you recognize yourself in these patterns and you're ready to make a change, do me a favor. Hit that like button. Leave a comment telling me which practice you're going to try tonight, because when you declare it publicly, you're more likely to follow through. You're creating external accountability for an internal decision. You're making a commitment not just to yourself, but to a community of people who are trying to grow just like you. And subscribe to this channel if you want more timeless wisdom about building a life that actually matters. Not because I need your subscription, but because you need the reminder. You need these principles showing up in your life regularly. You need someone telling you the truth about success, that it's not spectacular, it's steady. It's not flashy, it's faithful. It's not about what you do when everyone's watching, it's about what you do when no one is. It's not built in moments of inspiration, it's built in hours of invisible discipline. Success is nothing more than a few simple disciplines practiced every day. And your evening disciplines are the most important ones because they're the most voluntary, the most invisible, the most revealing of who you actually are when nobody's making you be anyone. See you in the next one. Now go make tonight count. Your future is watching.